I uncovered every secret from the last 30 years.
And I have given all the proofs of who was involved with Diddy. I have presented the videotape of Diddy's parties as evidence. Now no one can save Diddy and the other celebs. Jay-Z, all of them were Diddy's handlers. After watching the rest of the documentary, you'll understand everything.
Today is Wednesday, March 4th, 2026. And once again, 50 Cent has done it again. 50 Cent has just released part 3 of his Netflix documentary, and this time, the conversation around Diddy and Jay-Z is getting even louder. 50 Cent, Diddy, Jay-Z. 3 names that continue to collide in this story. Back on December 2nd, 2025, 50 Cent dropped the first Netflix documentary, a 4-part series that immediately shook the entertainment industry. That documentary focused heavily on Diddy. It raised questions about private environments, exclusive gatherings, and relationships that allegedly existed far away from public visibility. Then later, 50 Cent released another documentary, expanding the narrative and bringing Jay-Z deeper into the conversation. Now on March 4th, 2026, 50 Cent returns with part 3. And according to 50 Cent, this installment goes even further. In this new Netflix documentary, 50 Cent talks about secret parties, closed-door gatherings, usher private rooms where cameras were never allowed, after-hours environments that allegedly started once the public events ended. 50 Cent repeatedly brings up Diddy. 50 Cent repeatedly brings up Jay-Z. And 50 Cent suggests that some of the most important moments allegedly happened after midnight. Private meetings, restricted guest lists, exclusive inner circles. According to 50 Cent's documentary, these weren't the kind of events that appeared on social media. They weren't documented, when they weren't publicly acknowledged. Instead, they were described as environments designed to stay private. 50 Cent questions hidden alliances. 50 Cent questions private relationships. 50 Cent questions why certain connections involving Diddy and Jay-Z were never publicly confirmed. He talks about inner circles. He talks about late-night gatherings. He talks about patterns that, according to him, repeated over the years. But here's what makes this even bigger. See, Diddy's name is already under intense public scrutiny. Now 50 Cent has placed this conversation on Netflix, the biggest streaming platform in the world. And when 50 Cent releases part 3, when he keeps mentioning Diddy and Jay-Z together, when he highlights private environments and unanswered questions, the conversation gets louder. Is 50 Cent exposing something deeper about the entertainment industry? Or is this an ongoing narrative battle between some of the most powerful names in hip-hop? Because one thing is clear, 50 Cent knew exactly what he was doing when he released part 3. And tonight, we're breaking down everything. What 50 Cent says about Diddy, what 50 Cent says about Jay-Z, what's new in the part 3 Netflix documentary, and why this story might be far from over.
I am the fucking hardest hustler in the world. This is Savage Part 2. Don't tell me about shit. It's 2022 and I'm still a savage. Whatever I want, I get. Whatever I want, I fucking get.
In part 3 of the Netflix documentary, 50 Cent once again turns the spotlight away from what the public saw and toward what the public never saw. Not the red carpets, not the award shows, not the interviews that played across television and social media. Instead, 50 Cent focuses on private environments allegedly involving Diddy and Jay-Z, spaces that, according to the documentary's narrative, existed far from cameras and public visibility. Throughout this chapter, 50 Cent repeatedly returns to the idea of secret meetings, meetings reportedly held away from public view, meetings that didn't appear on official calendars, meetings that, according to the documentary, were never openly acknowledged. These weren't large industry events. They were described as small, controlled environments, private rooms, controlled timing, selective invitations. Only certain individuals were allowed inside. According to 50 Cent's framing, the documentary begins building tension. Because in an industry that thrives on visibility, premieres, press tours, interviews, secrecy stands out. 50 Cent suggests that some of these gatherings happened in private rooms where conversations allegedly never left the room. No recordings, no social media posts, no official confirmations, just conversations that, according to insiders referenced in the documentary, remained inside those walls. He also highlights closed-door parties, exclusive events where entry was restricted and guest lists were never publicly shared. These were not public celebrations. They were described as private gatherings designed to stay private. According to 50 Cent, what stands out most is repetition, the same environments, the same types of gatherings, and reportedly, the same names appearing again and again. Well, Diddy's name appears, Jay-Z's name appears, and throughout Part 3, 50 Cent repeatedly asked the same question. Why were Diddy and Jay-Z consistently present in these private spaces? Why were these events framed as intentionally undocumented? Because according to the documentary's narrative, many of these gatherings allegedly left no visible record, no photographs, no public acknowledgments, no interviews explaining what happened inside. Instead, they existed as quiet stories, moments remembered by those who attended, but never publicly described. 50 Cent does not present courtroom evidence in this section. Instead, he focuses on patterns, private environments, restricted entry, repeated names. He suggests that when powerful figures repeatedly appear in the same closed spaces, spaces designed to avoid visibility, the secrecy itself becomes part of the story. And that leads to the central question hanging over this chapter of the documentary. If everything that happened inside those rooms was completely normal, then why was it kept so private?
That claimed, which we know wasn't true.
Yeah, check this out. We don't talk about things that are nonsense. We don't even entertain nonsense, my brother. So we're not even going to go there, with all due respect, but I appreciate you as a journalist asking. Thank you.
Because listen, 7 years ago, I'd have been like, yo, did you hire somebody to kill Pac? But no, you do it like a journalist.
Yeah, no, I mean, we wouldn't even get into nonsense like that. You know what I'm saying? It's nonsense.
Which we never believed, by the way.
Yeah.
In Part 3 of the Netflix documentary, 50 Cent shifts the focus toward a different pattern. Not just secrecy, but timing. According to 50 Cent's framing, many of the interactions involving Diddy and Jay-Z allegedly didn't happen during the day. They happened after midnight. Not during press conferences, not during public events, not during business meetings announced to the media. Instead, the documentary suggests that some of the most important environments involving Diddy and Jay-Z allegedly existed in the late-night world. A world operating outside mainstream visibility. 50 Cent repeatedly describes after-hours gatherings, events that reportedly began once the official parties ended, moments that unfolded when cameras stopped rolling, gatherings that, according to the documentary, were never designed for publicity, private estates far from crowded city centers, luxury penthouses high above the skyline, exclusive yachts positioned away from busy harbors. These environments were not open to the public. They were described as invitation-only spaces, limited guest lists, controlled entry, and according to 50 Cent's narrative, familiar faces appearing repeatedly. But what makes these environments stand out isn't just the exclusivity, it's the absence of documentation. According to the documentary, when many of these moments were remembered by insiders but never recorded publicly, no photos posted the next day, no interviews referencing what happened inside, no official statements acknowledging who attended. In an era where celebrity culture thrives on exposure, social media posts, paparazzi photos, viral clips, these environments allegedly existed almost entirely off the record. And that's where the documentary introduces another theme: hidden relationships. 50 Cent suggests that some connections involving Diddy and Jay-Z were allegedly kept away from public branding. Publicly, the narrative was clear and carefully controlled. Business partnerships were announced, collaborations were promoted, public appearances were documented. But privately, according to the documentary's framing, certain relationships may have existed outside that public narrative. Alleged private connections, associations that insiders reportedly knew about, relationships that were never officially acknowledged. And throughout Part 3, 50 Cent repeatedly returns to the same question. If these relationships were harmless, why were they never confirmed? If these connections were ordinary, why were they never publicly discussed? Why did confirmations never come? Because in an industry built on visibility, where relationships often become headlines, silence becomes noticeable. 50 Cent repeatedly brings up Diddy. He repeatedly brings up Jay-Z. And he suggests that when certain associations consistently appear only in late-night environments, when connections are visible privately but invisible publicly, the contrast raises questions. The documentary does not claim to provide definitive answers. Instead, it focuses on patterns: late-night gatherings, private spaces, unacknowledged relationships. And as part 3 continues, one question begins to echo louder than the rest. If these connections were completely normal, why did certain associations only exist after dark?
50 Cent has been working on this documentary for almost 2 years. The footage he has is insane. The people he got speaking about Diddy is ridiculous.
In part 3 of the Netflix documentary, 50 Cent moves into one of the most sensitive parts of the discussion. But instead of making direct accusations, 50 Cent takes a different approach. He revisits conversations. Stories that, according to the documentary's framing, had already been circulating quietly within industry circles long before they reached public attention. Not explosive headlines, not official statements, but whispers. Private discussions between insiders. Rumors shared in small circles. Concerns that reportedly never made it into mainstream interviews. According to 50 Cent, some of these conversations involved alleged relationships with young women that raised quiet concerns among certain observers. He does not present courtroom findings in this section. Instead, he focuses on perception. Situations that reportedly made some insiders uncomfortable. Moments that, according to the documentary's narrative, felt questionable to people who were present. These weren't public controversies. They were described as uncomfortable observations shared privately. And according to 50 Cent, those concerns were rarely addressed publicly. But the documentary doesn't stop there. It also revisits another subject that, according to 50 Cent, was whispered about in certain industry circles. Alleged private relationships with men. Again, 50 Cent does not claim legal proof. Instead, he focuses on the idea of identity separation, public persona versus private life. According to the documentary's framing, Diddy and Jay-Z built carefully crafted public identities, moguls, entrepreneurs, global icons. But 50 Cent suggests that behind the public image, there may have been aspects of identity that were intentionally kept private, claims that certain relationships were handled quietly, associations that were never publicly acknowledged, stories that existed privately but were never confirmed. And this is where secrecy becomes the central theme. According to 50 Cent, extreme effort was allegedly placed on maintaining that secrecy. Controlled interviews, selective public appearances, carefully managed narratives, questions avoided, topics redirected, conversations quietly shut down. And what makes this chapter more significant is that 50 Cent claims these patterns were already hinted at before. Back in the earlier documentaries released in December 2025, similar themes were briefly mentioned. Private environments, hidden associations, unanswered questions. But in part 3, those same themes return with greater focus. 50 Cent repeatedly brings up Diddy. He repeatedly brings up Jay-Z. And he suggests that the effort to control narrative and identity may have been part of a much larger strategy. Because in an industry where image is everything, identity becomes currency. When how someone is perceived, what relationships are visible, what stories reach the public, all of it shapes reputation. But when certain topics are consistently avoided, when certain associations remain unconfirmed, when secrecy becomes routine, the effort itself becomes noticeable. 50 Cent doesn't claim to have every answer. Instead, he leaves viewers with a question that sits at the center of this chapter. If there was nothing to hide, why invest so much effort in controlling identity?
A lot of people say I'm doing this out of revenge because we've got beef. I won't deny it. Me and Diddy have had issues. We've been going at it since 2006. He blocked Mace from signing with me. I dissed him in a track. He launched the vodka line. I launched mine. It's been a back and forth for years. You know why he's so desperate to shut this film down? Because he knows we found things. Footage, phone calls, conversations he recorded himself, contracts, NDAs, real receipts. But Diddy ain't the only problem. He's just a symbol. This industry is full of people like him smiling in the spotlight while pulling strings and hurting people behind the scenes. I don't make things up.
In part 3 of the Netflix documentary, 50 Cent begins widening the lens even further. Until this point, much of the conversation has centered on Diddy and Jay-Z themselves, their alleged private environments, their late-night gatherings, and the questions surrounding their inner circles. But in this chapter, 50 Cent suggests the story may be bigger than just two names. According to the documentary's framing, the environments surrounding Diddy and Jay-Z may have involved a much broader network of influential figures, not just artists, not just producers, but powerful individuals across the entertainment industry, actors, executives, celebrity entrepreneurs. Part 3 expands the scope by connecting Diddy and Jay-Z to broader celebrity networks, suggesting that some relationships may have existed privately, even when they appeared distant publicly. Because in public, the narrative often looks simple. Certain celebrities rarely appeared together in interviews. Certain figures seemed to operate in separate circles. Certain alliances looked limited or occasional. But according to 50 Cent's framing, private familiarity may have looked very different. He suggests that some powerful names reportedly moved together quietly in exclusive environments. Private parties, VIP-only events, late-night gatherings where cameras were not present, events that, according to the documentary, were designed to stay private. And this is where the contrast becomes important. Public distance versus private familiarity. On the surface, relationships between celebrities might appear minimal. But inside certain private environments, 50 Cent suggests those same figures may have interacted much more frequently. Diddy's name appears again, Jay-Z's name appears again, and according to the documentary's narrative, if familiar names allegedly appeared around the same private spaces repeatedly, but the discussion doesn't stop with relationships. 50 Cent also revisits misconduct rumors that, according to him, circulated within industry conversations for years. Stories that were reportedly discussed quietly. Rumors shared among insiders. Conversations that, according to the documentary, rarely reached mainstream headlines. These weren't explosive scandals that dominated the news cycle. Instead, they were described as stories confined to private environments, stories told behind closed doors, stories shared at private gatherings, stories that never moved beyond those circles. And that's where industry silence becomes a major theme in Part 3. 50 Cent repeatedly questions why some rumors seem to fade instead of being addressed, why certain stories never became public investigations, why some conversations reportedly disappeared without explanation. According to 50 Cent, silence within powerful industries can sometimes be strategic. Reputation matters. Relationships matter. Access matters. When powerful figures share networks, challenging those networks publicly can become complicated. And according to the documentary's framing, this may have created an environment where certain stories simply never moved beyond private conversation. 50 Cent doesn't claim to present courtroom evidence in this chapter. Instead, he raises questions. Questions about networks, questions about silence, questions about awareness. Because if powerful figures were present in the same environments, if rumors circulated quietly within those environments, if stories were told but never confirmed, then the question shifts from what happened to who knew. And that leads directly to the central tension of this chapter. If these stories were circulating privately, if insiders were aware of them, if powerful figures shared those spaces, then the question becomes unavoidable. Who knew and chose to stay quiet?
Has been warning us about Jay-Z. Jay-Z has now had an official lawsuit. It's everywhere. It's now being talked about louder than ever. I guess, does that give you some peace to know that people are finally really questioning this man?
It's emboldening me. I spoke on Piers Morgan. I said that I had 3 victims that I've been working with, victims of the Carters, that were ready to come forward. This might help them feel a little more confident now. So this is great because he's been evading. But the thing is, everyone in the backdrop knew that he was the celebrity John Doe. Everybody knew that. They knew it when I did Piers Morgan.
Is Beyonce celebrity B?
I hope to God not. But she was around. And she's very... She's got enough on her plate. After everything that happened with the election and everything that's happening right now, I'm not going to dump on that woman. She got better fish to fry.
Well,
what I
look,
will say is that her husband, she knows exactly who he is.
Yeah.
She knows. She knows.
Rihanna was trafficked to Def Jam.
She was an innocent baby when she came over here. And look
She
at her
was
now.
14 going on 15 years old. Flown over without parental supervision in a private plane by a man who was supposed to be a producer who auditioned her at 3 a.m. in the fucking morning in a hotel room. Auditioning at 3 a.m. in the morning, a 14-year-old girl. She was flown to another country. She was taken to Def Jam headquarters. She was left in a conference room alone with Sean Carter for nearly 6 hours alone with no parental supervision. Her father collected a $500,000 check. She has the fastest
Diddy isn't going down
deal
quietly.
in debt.
In part 3 of the Netflix documentary, 50 Cent returns to a pattern that he believes deserves closer attention. Not just the events themselves, but the people who were always there. According to 50 Cent's framing, whenever private environments involving Diddy and Jay-Z are discussed, certain names reportedly appear again and again. The same faces, the same circles, the same exclusive environments. And that repetition becomes the focus of this chapter. Because according to the documentary's narrative, these weren't random gatherings filled with constantly changing guest lists. Instead, they were described as private inner circles. Small groups of individuals who allegedly moved together behind closed doors, people who were frequently present at the same private meetings, people who appeared repeatedly at the same exclusive gatherings. But interestingly, according to 50 Cent, many of these individuals were rarely mentioned publicly, and they didn't always appear in interviews. They weren't regularly referenced in press statements, and they weren't always associated with Diddy or Jay-Z in public narratives. Yet in private environments, according to the documentary, their presence was reportedly consistent. 50 Cent describes these relationships as unspoken connections between powerful individuals, not official partnerships, not public collaborations, but quiet associations maintained behind the scenes. And in industries built around reputation and image, these types of connections can remain almost invisible, because publicly, the narrative often appears simple. Artists collaborate, business partners announce deals, friendships appear on social media. But according to the documentary's framing, some relationships involving Diddy and Jay-Z allegedly existed outside that public structure. Off-record relationships maintained quietly, connections that insiders may have been aware of, associations that were never officially confirmed, but also never clearly denied. When questions surfaced, the answers were often vague. When certain names were mentioned publicly, responses were minimal. And when speculation grew, the topic sometimes disappeared entirely. 50 Cent frames this as narrative management, public image carefully constructed, public relationships selectively highlighted. But behind the scenes, according to the documentary, a much tighter network may have existed, a private ecosystem of influence. Diddy's name appears repeatedly, Jay-Z's name appears repeatedly, and alongside them, familiar individuals who reportedly appeared in many of the same private settings, again and again. 50 Cent does not claim that repetition proves wrongdoing. Instead, he highlights the pattern itself. Because when the same people appear in the same environments repeatedly, environments already described as private and undocumented, the consistency becomes difficult to ignore. Coincidences happen, but consistent patterns invite questions. Why were these same individuals present in so many private settings? Why were their connections rarely discussed publicly? Why were some associations never clarified? 50 Cent suggests that in an industry built around visibility, an invisibility can sometimes be intentional. Some relationships are meant to be seen, others are meant to stay quiet. And in part 3, that quiet network becomes one of the most intriguing aspects of the documentary. Because once you start noticing the same names in the same places, the question becomes impossible to avoid. Why do the same people appear in every private setting?
how did you get that footage of Diddy?
I figured most journalists would not disclose their sources.
If Sean Combs watches this, what do you think he's going to feel?
Like, wow, this is amazing. I think he's going to say this is the best documentary I've seen in a long time. My favorite villain? I kind of like Diddy.
In part 3 of the Netflix documentary, 50 Cent returns to a theme that has followed the story from the very beginning. Unfinished questions. Because according to 50 Cent's narrative, this story didn't start with part 3. It started months earlier. Back on December 2nd, 2025, when 50 Cent released the first 4-part documentary, the focus was clear. Diddy. That series introduced discussions about private environments, secret gatherings, and relationships that allegedly existed outside public visibility. Then came the second documentary, where the narrative expanded and Jay-Z's name began appearing more frequently. Now in part 3, 50 Cent doesn't present the story as something new. Instead, he frames it as unfinished business. Part 1 raised questions, Part 2 expanded them, and now Part 3 revisits what remains unresolved. According to 50 Cent, one of the most significant themes involves possible hidden alliances within the entertainment industry. Not formal partnerships announced publicly, not collaborations released through press conferences, but quiet coordination happening behind the scenes. He raises the idea of behind-the-scenes alignment between powerful figures. Publicly, certain celebrities may appear separate, different brands, different companies, different public narratives. But privately, according to the documentary's framing, the lines may not always be that clear. 50 Cent suggests that public separation sometimes contrasts with possible private alignment. Figures who appear distant publicly may still move within overlapping networks. Private events, exclusive industry gatherings, shared inner circles. These environments can create connections that the public never sees. And when powerful figures operate within the same networks, the influence becomes even more complex. Why? Because in industries driven by reputation and relationships, alliances don't always appear on paper. Sometimes they exist quietly. Diddy's name appears again in this chapter. Jay-Z's name appears again. And according to 50 Cent, certain accusations surrounding these networks never completely disappeared. They may have faded from headlines. They may have lost momentum in the news cycle. But according to the documentary's narrative, they were never fully resolved. And questions raised in December 2025 still linger. Stories that were mentioned but never clarified. Rumors that circulated but never received definitive responses. And over time, many of those questions simply faded into the background. But in part 3, 50 Cent brings them back. He revisits the same themes: private environments, hidden networks, unanswered accusations. And he suggests that ignoring those questions does not erase them. It only delays them. Well, 50 Cent does not claim to present final answers in this chapter. In fact, he frames part 3 as something very different from a conclusion. Instead of closing the story, he positions this documentary as another step in an ongoing narrative, another chapter in a much larger conversation. Because if accusations continue to linger, if questions raised months earlier remain unanswered, if powerful networks continue operating quietly, then the story may still be unfolding. And that leads to the central question hanging over this part of the documentary. If the first documentary only opened the door, if the second documentary expanded the conversation, then one possibility becomes hard to ignore. Was everything we saw before only the beginning? In part 3 of the Netflix documentary, 50 Cent begins shifting the conversation towards something deeper than just secrecy or hidden gatherings. He starts talking about power, influence, control. According to 50 Cent's framing, the most important question may not simply be who was present in these private environments involving Diddy and Jay-Z. The bigger question may be who controlled those environments. Because in highly exclusive spaces, spaces where access is limited and guest lists are tightly managed, influence plays a major role. Throughout this chapter, 50 Cent raises discussion around unconfirmed associations involving powerful figures. Connections that were reportedly visible in private environments, yet rarely acknowledged publicly. Bonds that were never officially confirmed. Relationships that were never clearly denied. Instead, according to the documentary's narrative, these associations often existed in a gray area, sometimes visible privately, but rarely discussed publicly. 50 Cent suggests that in certain cases, Relationships may have been erased from the public narrative while still continuing behind the scenes. Public interviews might avoid mentioning specific names. Press appearances might present a simplified story. But according to the documentary's framing, private environments sometimes told a different story. Diddy's name appears again. Jay-Z's name appears again. And according to 50 Cent, certain individuals allegedly remained connected within the same exclusive circles, even when those connections were not publicly acknowledged. This leads directly into the subject of access. And because access to certain environments is rarely random, according to the documentary's narrative, entry into these spaces was often controlled. Invitation-only gatherings, restricted guest lists, security present at the doors, only selected individuals allowed inside. And when access is controlled, power becomes the deciding factor. Who receives the invitation? Who gets to enter the room? Who decides who stays and who leaves? These questions become especially significant when discussing age differences and influence gaps. In this chapter, 50 Cent raises discussion around significant age gap concerns that reportedly existed in some of these environments. He does not present legal findings. Instead, he frames it as a question of imbalance, because when younger individuals enter environments dominated by powerful, experienced industry figures, the dynamics change. Influence becomes uneven. Power becomes concentrated, and decision-making often sits in the hands of those who control the space. According to 50 Cent's framing, the combination of wealth, status, and industry power can create environments where hierarchy is clear, even when it is never spoken aloud. The documentary does not claim to deliver final conclusions about these relationships. Instead, it focuses on structure, exclusive rooms, controlled access, unacknowledged connections. And when those factors combine, others walk in with very little, which others walk in with very little, which leads to the central question of this chapter. Inside those private rooms, who really held the power? As part 3 of the Netflix documentary reaches its final chapter, 50 Cent shifts the conversation away from individual moments and individual names. Instead, he zooms out, because according to 50 Cent's framing, what he is describing may not be about one party, one rumor, or one private meeting. It may be about a pattern that, according to the documentary, has been discussed quietly within entertainment circles for years. 50 Cent suggests that long before the release of these documentaries, rumors were already circulating within industry networks. Not public scandals, not headlines dominating the news, but conversations happening behind closed doors. Stories shared privately among insiders, concerns raised in small circles, moments that reportedly made certain people uncomfortable but were never formally addressed. According to the documentary's narrative, some of these discussions involve concerns about vulnerable individuals entering elite environments, young people entering rooms filled with powerful figures, exclusive spaces controlled by those with enormous wealth and influence, private events where access was restricted and visibility was limited. 50 Cent does not present legal findings in this chapter. Instead, he focuses on patterns of secrecy, because according to the documentary's framing, many of the same dynamics reportedly repeated over the years. Private gatherings, restricted access, inner circles that rarely change, stories told quietly but rarely reaching the public. And over time, these patterns allegedly became part of a larger culture. A culture where silence often protected reputations. In industries where image and influence are everything, speaking out can carry consequences. Relationships can be damaged. Opportunities can disappear. Careers can be affected. So according to 50 Cent, some people may have chosen silence, not necessarily because nothing happened, but because the system itself made silence easier than confrontation. And that silence allowed certain rumors to fade before they could become major public stories. But part 3 changes one important factor: visibility. Because once these conversations move from private whispers to a global streaming platform like Netflix, the dynamic shifts. Millions of viewers suddenly see the same narrative. Social media discussions begin spreading the story. Journalists begin revisiting old questions, and public attention begins building pressure. As Diddy's name continues appearing throughout the documentary, Jay-Z's name appears again as well. And according to 50 Cent, placing these discussions on Netflix forces the entertainment industry to confront conversations that may have previously stayed quiet. Because once a story reaches global audiences, it becomes much harder to ignore. And now that part 3 is part of the conversation, the question becomes whether the industry can continue moving forward without addressing these narratives. Will the discussion fade again like earlier rumors? Or will renewed attention force deeper scrutiny? 50 Cent doesn't claim to have the final answers. Instead, he leaves the audience with a final question that echoes throughout the documentary. If silence protected reputations before, if rumors stayed inside private circles, if powerful networks kept certain stories contained, then the real question now becomes unavoidable. If silence protected them before, what happens now that 50 Cent has released part 3 on Netflix?